The Big 12 College Experience, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, is brought to you by Circa Sports. Circa Sports is back with their Circa Survivor and Circa Millions contest. $14 million up for grabs. Get all the detail at circasports.com. And welcome back to the Big 12 College Experience, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is Wednesday afternoon. It is Media Day officially in the Big 12. I am your co-host, Moneyline Mac, former video coordinator for Bob Huggins and Frank Martin, and back in my studio, not at the beach anymore, so got the West Virginia backdrop. And I am joined by my co-host. He was born in Provo, Utah. He is a walking contradiction. He even has family in Ames, Iowa, and he lives in Morgantown, West Virginia. Everybody, welcome Rambling Rush. How are you doing, man?
Doing great. As we talked about, and the same applies to Troy, it's a family affair here in the Big 12 Conference. Media Day got started off, and excited to talk about it and the storylines with these teams.
The storylines indeed. And yes, we are joined by third man in the box. He's always battling a family civil war. He's got family ties in what? Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, TCU, and Houston. Give it up for the Big 12 guru, Troy Chewning. What's up, man?
Definitely Baylor, with UCF coming in. We got UCF family there. Maybe a girlfriend from Cincinnati or so. You never know. There's always something going on.
A little bit of everything.
Troy spread his seed all over the Big 12, so he can probably, except Provo. You got to go do some soaking in Provo, Troy.
Man, I don't know if I can soak, man. Soaking might be a little too much.
Just give me a Ryan to jump on the mattress. We'll take care of you.
Yeah, he needs you to get the waves moving for me.
Just ask Brandon Davies how that worked out for him trying to soak out there and Brigham Young. But yes, this is the Big 12 College Experience, episode number 2. And we're right into media days. Commissioner Brett Yormark took the mic, 2 hours ago, got it on in the background. Sonny Dykes was just up there, Lance Leipold. I'll turn it over to you, Rush. Any initial thoughts from the commissioner's remarks, any of the coaches? Obviously, on Friday, we will dive into the Big 12 media day as a full recap, but any initial thoughts?
Yeah, Yormark, nothing too big that was announced, kind of reiterating his plans to expand and make this a global league. Something I did kind of find funny when we were looking up the times for the different teams and going on. They still do everything in Central Time, so I don't know how that'll change over time. But hey, they still consider themselves a Central Time Zone league. Something kind of more on the funny side of things was Dana Holgorsen. Was watching him talk about his Houston team and how glad he is to be in the Big 12 and be bringing in the Big 12 money for the Big 12 recruiting. He was talking about, hey, there's a lot coming up for Houston. It's like, dude, you may not even survive the season at Houston. You got to focus in right now. So, and Dana Holgorsen talking about, he's like, yeah, I want a Power 5 job. It's like, dude, you had one. So I think he was chasing the money there. He's not quite the person he was, talking about how it's Power 5 and everything that goes into that. So, a little bit of a money chaser that's pretending not to be, but is what it is.
The question is, did he have a Red Bull or not? And if he did, what number Red Bull of the day was it?
Well, I think that's you just answered the question. It's not if he had a Red Bull, it's what number he's on at this point. So it's about 2:30 there. We'll say, 1 an hour.
3 Red Bulls.
Yeah, 3. I think that's a good over-under.
But like the 16-ounce, real big, thick ones too, not those little pansy 8.4-ounce ones.
No, remember, he did coach at Morgantown. He coached at West Virginia University. Those Red Bulls are getting ready to turn into Red Bull vodka. So, yeah, Big 12 guru Troy Chewning. Any initial thoughts on the commissioner's remarks? Any coaches stand out today? Anything that caught your eye?
I just really like when places decide they're going to pick like one city outside of the United States, and then it's just bam, we're a global league now. I mean,
yeah,
Mexico City is going to be wild. They're going to have to let BYU or someone play down there that's used to the altitude, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and well, that was one of the things that stood out with the different questions that he took is their efforts to go global with Mexico. That was one of the main points he talked about is they're going to have multiple games broadcasted on ESPN Deportes. Obviously, Big 12 in Mexico launching in December of 2024, so we're still more than a year out from that, but he mentioned his efforts to go to New York. They're going to New York with the select amount of coaches here. So he's just a different background. And you know what? As much as we hate the Dallas Cowboys, Rush, and Troy is a Dallas Cowboys fan, they do have the best stadium. I mean, that place is that you got to give Jerry World a little bit of credit there, right?
Can we got to give Jerry a lot of credit for that one, even though he hasn't won too many important games in that stadium. I do want to kind of goof around with Colby and the guys. They were doing their Big 12 whole league preview from the last couple of nights, and they were so convinced because they didn't know that Jones AT&T Stadium in Lubbock is not AT&T Stadium.
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I did hear that, and everybody go check out the main Sports Gambling podcast because the theme of the show was this league is so fantastic where every game's a toss-up game, and that's what we've been saying about the Big 12. Is top to bottom, it is by far the best and most entertaining league in America. So that's why we have a Big 12 college experience, because it is the best league. So yeah, go check out that. They couldn't comprehend that there was two Joneses, AT&T. So that's great. Go ahead, Rush.
All I was going to say about that stadium, the best game ever played was the first game there. BYU crushed Sam Bradford. So looking forward to that matchup again this year. BYU.
Still remember that one.
Yeah, that was a great game.
That's more big wins than the Dallas Cowboys and University of Texas have had in Jerry World. I got to get us paid. It's Circa Sports, Circa Millions, and Circa Survivor back. $14 million are guaranteed up for in prizes. Circa Millions, 5 NFL picks ATS each week. Circa Survivor, just pick a different money line each week. There's plenty of money line underdogs, including the Cowboys were in a trap game in week 1 at the New York Football Giants. Enter in Vegas, play from wherever. Sports Gambling Podcast will be out there the last weekend in August. That is at thecircusports.com for all the details. Circusports.com. $14 million. I think that could get us to Media Day, don't you think?
We'd be running Media Day with $14 million. It would be the Big 12 College Experience Big 12 Media Day. We'd be able to sponsor the whole thing.
One day. That's in the card within the next year and a half. So stay tuned. Let's dive into. Point of this episode today is the storylines headed into Media Day. I know that it just started, but we'll go in reverse order here, where the West Virginia Mountaineers unfortunately come in at 14. Obviously, their over/under in Vegas is set at 4.5. Their odds to win the conference are set at plus 1,500. So actually, sorry, plus 15,000. So I can't remember them ever being this big a dog. Rush and I are going to split this one. Everybody, for the rest of them, each co-host is going to get a specific team. But since Rush and I co-host the Ryan and Rush show, and we're both West Virginia grads, we're going to split this one. The main headline for me, storyline going into the year, can the West Virginia Mountaineers be a physical team on the offensive and defensive side of the ball? They're 14-4 when they rushed for over 100 yards. We saw what they were able to do when they went to Garrett Green in that rushing attack, sweeping the Oklahoma schools. That is the main storyline for me for the West Virginia Mountaineers headed into the season. Rush, I'll hand it to you, my man.
Excellent first point there, Ryan, especially as we've seen in the past years with this West Virginia team. It seems like they can always figure out one side of the ball, but they can't figure out both. So going into what you were saying, and you were bringing up their rushing, they're 14-4, can Garrett Green be that dual threat quarterback? Can they run RPO? Can, even a couple option plays in there, especially with their strong running game, great running backs, and questionable wide receivers, to what extent can Garrett Green be a dual threat quarterback? And then to keep it kind of really simple, there's one game on this schedule, Ryan, I know you will agree with this, that will kind of determine the rest of the season. And that is the Pitt game. It's obviously we have Penn State to start, keep that game close, cover the spread, crush Duquesne at home in that first game. But that Pitt game, especially a game we should have won last year, anything can happen in a rivalry game. If we lose that Pitt game, and next thing you know, we're 1-2, we're talking buyouts with Neal Brown, kind of like Chris last year with Wisconsin. But if we win that Pitt game, man, that might be the momentum needing to go right into that Big 12 schedule. So in terms of storylines, it comes down to one game, and it's week 3 against Pitt.
I think we have a pretty good pulse on this one, Rush, obviously, since we host the Ryan and Rush show where we cover West Virginia sports. Troy, anything to add with the Mountaineers going into this upcoming year? Obviously, it's a big year for Neal Brown, and we are going to win the Pitt game, so eat shit, Pitt, but I'll hand it to you, Troy.
I really hope they beat Pitt. I think that I mean that's the whole over-under season right there. It hits if they beat Pitt. Like you could lock that in if they go and beat Pitt in week 1. So I mean that could even week 3 that could even save Neal Brown his job, even if he doesn't win much for the rest of the year. Just looking back and being like, man, at least we got Pitt this time. That
it will go a long way for the fan base because nobody has forgotten that ridiculous collapse last year.
In terms of they'll give him the season instead of letting him go, 5 or 7 games into the year. If they can beat that Pitt game, there's still going to be that hopium for the rest of the year. Like, yeah, but what if we get back to that? What if we get back to that? So really hoping that goes down.
Couldn't agree more.
We are all co-signing that one. Rush, you are on the clock for the UC Cincinnati Bearcats, newest member of the Big 12. Give us some storylines for the Bearcats coming in this year.
5 hours away from good old Morgantown, good traveling partner for West Virginia. Looking forward to that rivalry becoming a thing again. It looks like Cincinnati to win the Big 12 is plus 6,000. The over-under is 4.5. The 3 storylines I have for the Cincinnati Bearcats this year. New coach, Scott Satterfield from App State, is continuing that culture that was built by Brian Kelly and Luke Fickell. Can he come in? There's not a lot of expectations for Cincinnati this year. There's really no pressure at all. Even if they make a bowl, of course, great for them, but it's not even expected. It's just right now is building that foundation, building that culture. Going offensive wise, Emory Jones, he won the quarterback battle from their spring game, pardon me. Can he stay consistent and not make boneheaded mistakes? The Cincinnati team is, you're going to kind of see how they do in the Big 12 are they able to come in, keep games close? Maybe they are kind of like Iowa State last year, lose some 1-possession games, but at least not be one of those like, oh, we're playing Cincinnati this week. That's an automatic win. So making, especially from the quarterback position, making the other teams beat you. And then especially Cincinnati does have still a good defense coming in. Let your defense be the offense, be those ball hawks. You got a veteran defense. Is kind of going back to point 2 with the offense and the quarterback, Emory Jones, is, hey, you don't turn the ball over, you game manage. Maybe you settle for a field goal, or maybe you just don't turn it over and punt it and get them in, deep in their own position. And the next thing you know, the defense gets a pick 6 or something like that. So sometimes that strategy of letting your defense be the offense can get you far and keep you competitive in games.
Cincinnati's such an interesting team, just with the way that they're transitioning over from Luke Fickell in the new era into the Big 12. It's kind of all hitting them at once with Scott Satterfield. So, yeah, looking forward to see what the Bearcats got. Troy, anything before we move on to your next team with the Cincinnati Bearcats coming into this year?
Yeah, I'm afraid that all of the things that Rush was asking of Emory Jones is the exact opposite of how that dude plays. So he's going to be throwing the ball to the other team. He might not even make it all the way through the year as a starting quarterback. Cincinnati's going to suck. They're going to suck real bad.
I don't have high hopes for Cincinnati either. And that's for them to have a chance is, like you said.
Their season win total was 4.5, right?
4.5.
Yeah, hammer that under. Cincinnati's going nowhere.
I agree. I think they're a 4-win team.
And by the way, we will preview each and every team leading up to the season. So don't make sure you tune back for our official team preview. Maybe we'll sway to the over. Maybe we'll go 5-7. Shit, Troy has a Cincinnati shirt on right now, but he's still on the under as of right now.
I'm just being honest.
Hey, speaking of a team that I think Troy may be on the under as well, or some others, Dana Holgorsen and the Houston Cougars, the Red Bull University. What we got here, Troy, for these Cougars that are finally in the Big 12?
So Houston's over-under is also 4.5. I think that's an easy under to hammer. They're plus 8,000 to win the Big 12. I think that's an easy – I'm definitely not going to bet that. It's very funny that Dana would talk about finally getting a Power 5 schedule because since 2019, Dana's 0-11 against now Power 5 teams, and the only win is against Auburn in that 2021 Birmingham Bowl that kind of ended kind of wacky. They're rolling with a Texas Tech transfer and Donovan Smith at quarterback that kind of seems to be the rest of the league is also going for old Texas Tech QBs. But I think Houston's season is going to be determined right away with UTSA playing them right off the bat. They barely got them. Houston barely got them by 2 points last year, 37-35. And I think UTSA is a little bit of an improved team, whereas Houston has taken a step back. The biggest storyline is going to be how many weeks does Dana make it, because there's no way he's making it through this year, right? Like they finally get into the Big 12. They finally get the exposure that they're looking for. And then you can't just have a guy lay an egg like that. I mean, I know he's literally, his head is an egg, but.
Well, hey, the ironic thing, Troy, is that at the late in October, I hope this isn't the case for the Mountaineers. You could have a loser loses their job type game with Dana versus Neal Brown, the irony of Neal Brown replacing Dana Holgorsen. So yeah, no, a lot of storylines with Houston. Rush, anything to add for our former head ball coach down in H-Town?
To give Dana some credit, is I really liked him being the coach here. Wish West Virginia at the time would have paid them, but clearly it didn't make a difference. No, he keeps talking about the future and how recruiting's going to get better. And it's like, dude, I don't know if you're going to make it past week 3 or 4. So we'll see.
Yeah, we shall see. And we also shall see with Underdog Fantasy, because we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball Mania is here, and Underdog Fantasy is giving away $15 million in prizes. Underdog Pick'em is also a great way to get down on your favorite MLB and NFL season player props. So many ways to win over on Underdog, and Underdog is available in so many different states. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit up to $100. That's the UnderdogFantasy.com promo code SGPN. All right, we are moving along, and I think everybody can guess who's going to have this team for their preview. This is like
who's going to be the expert
that Mac's going to have West Virginia. So. Yes, Rush, let us know how the Mormons are going to be this year.
The good gospel of BYU factory, man. I mixed it up. The good gospel of BYU football, the former quarterback factory, plus 6,000 to win the Big 12, owned over under 6. I did the preview with Colby on the channel. It's 5.5 at the time. We're now at 6. So they must have heard, our argument for BYU. Had them going 7-5 on the preview. So they bumped it up to 6. One of the big storylines going in is their new defensive coordinator, Jay Hill from Weber State. Weber State was a fantastic FCS team, great program, and definitely an up-and-coming one. He's totally revamping and revitalizing their defense, going to be more aggressive. And I think because of the history of BYU being that quarterback factory, is there's always been this mindset to lean on the offense, that the offense will win you the game. And we've seen the defense in the past be flat-footed, not be able to make a stop and, lose games because of it. So looking forward to seeing this aggressive style of defense. And Jay Hill, going from a head coaching job to a defensive coordinator job. I also think if Sitaki, for whatever reason, gets another job or is not the guy, that he wants that head coaching job. So I think it's an investment on himself and a belief in himself that he's going to put together a pretty great defense. And I'm glad they're opening against 2 FCS opponents too, to get the defense together before they take on Arkansas. The next one, not a fan of Slovis because of obvious reasons, the former Pitt quarterback. But
fuck that guy.
Yeah, I'm in a really weird.
He was just chasing some punani. Cut him some slack.
Yeah, I'm in a really weird I kind of got to cheer for this guy, but he said fuck West Virginia, and it's there. I brought it up, doing a lot of mental exercises in my head trying to figure out this one. But for the sake of BYU football, big question is, can he stay healthy? If he can stay healthy, this 7, maybe squeak out 8-win team. If he doesn't, then we're obviously hitting the under. And, you know, what goes into that is they're playing the most Power 5 teams they've ever played, 10 this year. So going kind of from that independent schedule where they would pile it up. They did a great job. You know, we brought up the Coastal Carolina game, 2 days notice back in 2020. BYU has always had the mentality, we'll play anyone, anywhere. But, you know, having the home field advantage of Provo, having the FCS opponents to start to kind of tune up, is how are they going to respond? Is this going to be kind of a seamless transition, like a lot of people think, or at least more of a seamless transition than the other opponents coming in? Or are they going to, you know, get smacked around a little bit and not be as seamless as they thought? So interesting there for the old Cougars.
We need to set up a Big 12 SEC challenge. Now that it's done in basketball, we need to set up with football, because the Big 12 will beat the SEC in a football challenge. I guarantee it, because these bottom 4 teams, are you kidding me? BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, West Virginia are your bottom 4 worst teams. I mean, I think you can make an argument for all of them to overachieve and be in the hunt.
With how we've talked about how even this league is from top to bottom, it's going to be hard for any of these teams to go to Provo at elevation and win a game. That's going to their home advantage is going to play a lot, especially for the first couple of years that they're in the league, but definitely right off the bat. BYU is a scary football team just because of that. And like we talked about on the last episode, they're a national brand. They've got a lot of fans all over the place.
A lot of Mormons running.
Lot of Mormons all over the place. And a lot of Mormons soaking. I want to add one more point that helps out BYU in today's, you know, NIL and transfer portal. A lot of guys, you see it with Slovis, right? They don't want to go to BYU to do 4 or 5 years in the Mormon culture lifestyle. But someone like Slovis is being like, I need my chance. I want to go back to where they have great quarterbacks and a reputation for quarterbacks. I can deal with the lifestyle for a year or two, as opposed to 4 or 5. So that is something that helps out BYU. And there's a lot of money in Provo too. So going to be interesting for years to come to see how BYU responds to all of that.
Yeah, and looking forward to it. And I agree with the main guys over at the main station is BYU West Virginia needs to become Catholics versus convicts part 2, meth versus Mormons. So
yeah, Mormons versus meth heads, baby.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah,
we're like, we need to have that. Obviously, we hate the neutral site like league games, but that one could be okay if we had it at like a park.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean,
well, we basically played at FedEx Field. It basically was at a park.
Yeah.
Surprised nobody blew out their knee with that bullshit turf that Dan Snyder's got. So that was Taysom Hill back in the day.
Taysom Hill, yeah, for Skylar Howard. It's a great game.
Now he's a tight end. So figure that. Rush, you are on the clock again, and you got I know a team that you're high on. I think a lot of us are high on this team. Break down the Cyclones for us.
Absolutely. Got my great uncle Dick, lives in Ames, was a professor at Iowa State. Iowa State is plus 2,500 odds to win the Big 12. Over under is 5.5. And one of the reasons I am high on the Cyclones this year is they lost 6 one-possession games last year. Their offense averaged 20.2 points a game, while their defense averaged 20.3 points allowed. So just that 0.1, I mean, it's a game of inches, right? In football, you see what a 0.1 can do, and that's 6 games right there. So I think you're going to see something similar to kind of a mirror of that. Maybe they go 8-4 this year. I think another big kind of going back into the quarterback, Hunter Decker, has to cut down on the turnovers, has to play disciplined football. Threw for 19 touchdowns last year, but had 14 interceptions. Needs to cut those interceptions down by at least 5. At least half of them would be nice, but at least by 5 of them. They also have a new offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. The new offensive line coach was from UNI, and they should have a good offensive line this year. A lot of age, some depth to it. It should definitely improve from last season. So we'll see how that goes. And then the defense just kind of has to keep doing what they're doing. You definitely, keep opponents to 20.3 points allowed per game. No problem. But it's more a question of the offense, because there are going to be those games. We've seen it where the defense is just going to let up a lot of points. The games just happen. So it's going to be a question is, can this offense respond? But defense, keep, digging your heels in and doing what they do. So Going to be an interesting season for Iowa State.
Yeah, and if you're trying to label a team that regression positively that will happen, you got to go to Iowa State. You mentioned it, the stats, the statistic where they lost all those one-possession games. The only game they got drilled was that last game in Fort Worth when they were playing for the playoff. But I'm with you. And they're well coached. We know that Matt Campbell's going to run a good program.
Mm-hmm.
Troy, I know that the Sooners opened with the Cyclones to start Big 12 play. What do you think of these Cyclones as a potential bounce back candidate?
They they're going to be able to perform defensively at home because of the way that they always grow the grass longer in Ames, and you just can't run nearly as quick, and the team's already prepared for that, and everybody's always changing cleats on the away team like they're not ready for this crazy whatever. I mean, turf grass management matters out there in Ames, and they show up. So that's a pretty home field advantage for them. I think Iowa State has a pretty good chance of winning about 7-8 games this year.
There's one game I can guarantee they're going to win. It's going to be their last home game, and it's going to be against Texas, because Texas is not walking into Ames, their final game of the year, and getting it done.
And I was going to mention that later when I talk about Texas, but this is they go to Alabama in the beginning of the year, and they go to Ames, and that's the only games they play outside of the state of Texas.
Yeah, no, it's a favorable schedule. They look like a prime bounce back opportunity. Speaking of bounce back opportunities, Kansas bounced back from about 10 years of sucking ass, and they have the preseason player of the year. No, this is not basketball. This is not Hunter Dickinson or Azubuike that we're talking about. We're talking about Jalen Daniels, a quarterback who had 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And honestly, they started 5-0 last year, and then when he went down, they struggled a little bit, found a way to get to a bowl game for the first time since the Mangino days of the Orange Bowl win over Virginia Tech. I think the big headline here is now that Kansas is not completely on a 1.5, 2.5 win total. I skipped over their win total, by the way, which is set at 6 even, and their futures to win the Big 12 are set at 50-1. I think all of a sudden they're not completely the hunted, but they're definitely not the total hunter when you got the preseason player of the year in Jalen Daniels. Lance Leipold enters his 3rd year there, and they take it a step every year. Can they go from 2 wins to 6 wins to potentially 8-9 wins, keep progressing in that trajectory under Lance Leipold? It's really going to be interesting because Kansas, like I said, we are not used to talking about Kansas in this way. And I think that's the biggest headline outside of just can Jalen Daniels be a true Heisman candidate?
I think Kansas this year, the bit, it's like you're saying, can they maintain? It's you brought up the hunter and hunted. It's now that they've had a season of success, and they probably would have gotten more than 6 wins. We've talked about this if Jalen Daniels doesn't go down last year, but now you got to make sure from a mindset and mentality that they're not now going overconfident and overcompensating and thinking like, oh, we got our guy, we got this, we're just going to roll in and show everyone who's boss is. Can Leipold keep everyone hungry still? I think that's the question when it comes to Kansas.
I was going to say in terms of the media that's coming out specifically from Kansas or from Kansas itself, instead of like someone speaking on behalf of what they think about the football team, Leipold seems to hold everything pretty close to him and not really, let too many people know about what their real expectations are outside of, saying the whole like, oh, we plan to win the league. We plan to win the league. We're going to go out and try to win every game. Leipold doesn't seem like he's too emotionally high or low. And I think that's going to help them out a little bit.
I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in America. I thought he did a fantastic job at Buffalo, and even before that, Wisconsin Whitewater. Anytime you coach and win multiple championships at Wisconsin Whitewater, you can coach some football. So, I think Kansas kind of fits the bill of all these other teams. Very intriguing. It's just you could have a ceiling where they finish in the top 3, but they could also be back where they have been for years and years, back in the bottom 3. And I think it all depends on the health of Jalen Daniels.
I think you're going to see, kind of just speaking as the Big 12 as a whole, but this definitely applies to Kansas. especially their recent success, is I think the Big 12 is going to be the conference of the most parity. I think you could go to the Big 12 championship with 3 losses, maybe 4 with a tiebreaker, but 3 conference losses will get you, of course, depending on who it is. And I think you're going to see a lot of teams between that 5-7 to 7-5 range. A lot of just every other, not a lot of streaky teams. And I think Kansas is kind of the definition of that.
Yeah, a lot of these teams will be able to beat somebody like Texas and then turn around the next week and get beat by Baylor 21 or something like that.
It will be interesting, and we'll be here every step of the way covering it on the Big 12 Experience. The highest ranked newest member of the Big 12 is the Central Florida. By the way, they don't like to be called Central Florida, and they don't like to be called the Golden Knights. So the Central Florida, very, very Golden Knights. So, but don't worry, Central UCF, whatever you guys want to be called. I'm a big fan of your program, and I think you're probably the most underrated team in this league headed in this year. I got Central Florida currently, UCF, at 45-1 to win the Big 12. Over under set at 6.5. I think kind of like these other teams, Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, how do you translate going from the AAC to the Big 12? Translate offensively, skill player-wise, they have Big 12 athletes with Baker, Harvey, Whitmore, Hudson on the outside on the perimeter, and then Riles Plumlee in year 2 playing under Gus Malzahn. He showed flashes. He showed flashes at Ole Miss before that. He's a mobile quarterback, kind of like all of Gus Malzahn's guys have been at Auburn before that. And I think another headline here with UCF, year 3 of the Gus Malzahn era, can he continue the magic at the Power 5 level? Can they turn the bounce house into what we would consider one of the best home atmospheres like everybody else in the Big 12? We talked about BYU. Morgantown's one of the hardest places to play. Texas Tech, K-State, it goes on and on. Can UCF be that next place where you got to go, oh, shit, we got to go down to Orlando and take an ass whip? And so I think those are some of the headlines I'm looking at with the UCF very, very Golden Knights in their inaugural year in the Big 12.
I think we're going to see next year one of these 4 teams that join this year in the Big 12 championship. It's just, we'll
Agreed.
See which team it is, but I think we're going to see one of them. And it very well could be Central Florida, the shiny Golden Knights.
Yeah.
Shout out to Night Library. Got wasted there a lot.
And to piggyback off of what I was talking about, with can they become the next home field advantage in the Big 12? I'll take it a step further. Can they become, not yet, but the best program in the state of Florida in years to come with the Big 12 Power 5 budget, brand, revenue? I mean, I think that they could give Florida State, hell, Miami sucks ass. They'd finish last in this league. A run for their money now that they're in a Power 5 Big 12 league.
They have the most students enrolled. They have a lot of money in Orlando. You get Disney involved somehow, could be great for them.
Most recent national championship in the Big 12, right? Like in football.
Yeah, they did go undefeated. They just weren't invited to the college football invitational, as Colby would say.
But you can claim whatever the hell you want, They played better than like an old Michigan 1908 team that like created a team out of the practice squad just to beat the crap out of them on Saturday.
Yeah, no, Scott Frost, he wishes he never left Central Florida to go to Nebraska.
PC principal Scott Frost.
Oh, God, we don't need Nebraska left this league. They're in the stupid Big Ten now. So, all right, Troy, you're back on the clock, and I will turn it over to a guy that's on the TV in the background. My favorite coach in the league, Mr. Gundy. Troy, take it away.
He's a man. He's now what, like 57 or something like that, 56.
He's the GOAT, man.
Oh, man. So Oklahoma State comes in at 6.5 on their over-under. And I really don't – I would almost stray away from anything on that one. They're 50-1 to win the Big 12. Both of those kind of seem like null bets for me, only because my first storyline is when expectations are low in Stillwater – that motherfucker Mike Gundy puts together some of the dumbest games. like they're going to lose to Baylor and beat Oklahoma by 3 touchdowns or something like that. It's going to be the craziest thing ever. This is probably going to be the closest that Gundy gets to having a losing season. I mean, I know last year they only won game over 500, but he hasn't had a losing season since his very first year in Stillwater in 2005. That's probably worth trying to keep alive if you're an Oklahoma State athlete. They've got, this is another theme that I really like paying attention to. Alan Bowman, another Texas Tech transfer playing quarterback. Texas Tech has to have the most quarterbacks spread out throughout all of college football.
Yeah.
They show up there for a couple of months, and before you know it, they're like, man, I could throw for 3,800 yards in a few games.
Cliff Kingsbury, Lincoln Riley. I mean, they got them all. They're
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. He's pretty good.
He's okay.
The last storyline I wanted to focus on was the reason why I'm straying away from any kind of bets on Oklahoma State. They only returned 2 starters on defense, and they've got Brian Nardo, a brand new defensive coordinator. It's going to look like high school football on defense.
And that's why I think you got to take him 50-1 to win the Big 12. In the league that makes no sense, the team that brings back the least, everybody's shitting on Gundy. He's lost it. I mean, I'm taking a stab. He, like you said, he hasn't won less than 7 games since the year his first year in the league.
05.
Yeah, 05. He's won 7 or more games in every year. And yeah, I think you got to take the over with Gundy.
Let me ask you a question. I actually have a question about Gundy. I know we were talking about Dana and Neal Brown. If Gundy goes out 4-8 this year, is he on the hot? Is he done? Or does he kind of then just go on the hot seat? What is his status at Oklahoma? What are his expectations, Troy?
So I don't understand as to why, if athletes are allowed NIL deals, why hasn't Gundy hit up a sweet $2 million NIL deal with OAN and just lock himself in there in Stillwater? Then the record doesn't even matter. You can just keep showing up to work with your 2A shirt on, and everyone's going to be like, man, that Gundy guy, he just really gets it. I think he would be on the hot seat. I don't think they would let him go. I think they would, if anything, it would be 4 or 3 wins. And then after the first 5 or 6 games next year, they might be looking to move.
Gotcha.
There's nobody they can get better wants to come to Stillwater.
I agree.
Yeah. I'll never say never, just because of the time and day age we live in. I mean, you got people calling for Kirk Ferentz's job over at Iowa. But I think they would be out of their minds just if Gundy finally had his first losing season since 2005 to be calling for his head. I mean, the guy's been a model of consistency. Hey, and shout out to the chat, by the way, Captain Insano. They got a great schedule this year. They avoided Texas. I looked at it the other day. They're only going to be dogs in 2 or 3 games, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with why maybe their win total, despite not bringing anybody back, is 7.5. I'm pulling it up right now, but yeah, no, I love OK State this year. Would you say, Rush?
I had them at 6.5. So the 7 number, if you go back to 05, the 7 number would crush it.
Their non-con's really easy. I mean,
yeah.
Arizona State's their Pac-12. They'll go 3-0 to start. They avoided Texas. Yeah. I'm curious how that BYU game is going to be to end the season. I think that could be that could have some bowl implications.
So they avoided, just looking at the preseason polls, they avoided Texas, who was unrightfully ranked number 1. That's just not true. Texas Tech ranked number 4. And then they also avoided TCU, who's ranked number 5. So they avoided 3 out of the top 5. And then they get Oklahoma coming to Stillwater, which is, Troy, for somebody that has family ties in Oklahoma fighting the Civil War, that's an autoplay taking the Cowboys in the last game of Bedlam.
Before they leave for another conference?
Yes.
There's no way that Oklahoma State's defense can stop Dylan Gabriel. Oklahoma's going to score 55 points on him. But that doesn't mean that Oklahoma State won't still win the game. I put their chances at that one pretty low. The only reason why it would happen would be some magical, where don't let the door hit your ass on the way out, buddy.
It's a fuck you game. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So, 56-55 Cowboys get it done. We spent too much time on our favorite Cowboy. You can tell that we're a Mike Gundy podcast. So
love Gundy.
Shout out to Gundy. Shout out to OAN. Fuck, everybody's got a problem. All right. Anyway, moving along.
Was that an ad read?
Yeah, that was an ad read. And we're moving along to the Baylor Bears. Not defending. 2 years ago, Big 12 champs. Troy, you're on the clock for Sikkim.
For the Baylor Bears, well, they've at least got some kind of continuity. I mean, everybody's kind of returning a quarterback that should be okay, but we don't really know how okay they are. I think the biggest storyline for Baylor is going to be if the linebacker transfers they got can replace the defensive back transfers they lost. And I don't really know how they're going to try to find a way to do it. But with Dave Aranda there, I'm thinking that Baylor might be the surprise team of the league just because of their offensive. They've got more guys coming back. They've all the skill position players, which, in the Big 12, any kind of speed is going to crush anybody. It just seems like they're the quietest of all of those mid-range teams right now. And I think I trust Blake Shapen a little bit more than most people in the nation do. So I'm thinking that Baylor might be the one that you bet on to win the conference. I don't know if you have any odds on them because that's the only thing that I didn't write down on their conference odds in my little notebook.
20 to
but it's got to be
20 to 1.
Oh man, that's got to be worth a bit of a sprinkle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially knowing that all you got to do is get in that championship game, even with 3 losses or something like that, and pull it out.
Ryan, how you feel about Oklahoma State? I feel about Baylor. I think Baylor's the dark horse this year for the Big 12. And I think a very good litmus test to start their season is week 2, September 9th, when Utah goes to Waco. Like that will have a lot of obviously it doesn't affect the Big 12 standings, but that in terms of West Virginia's Pitt is Baylor's Utah. And I think there'll be a lot of that game that will tell us a lot about this Baylor team.
I agree. And I feel like I'm high on every team in this league. You can tell I love the Big 12 because I've literally made a case even for Houston, Cincinnati, and of course, West Virginia. But Baylor fits that bill, and I like their schedule a lot. I like their schedule drawing Texas at home to start Big 12 play. That's going to be a win. That's the last trip, like you said, to Waco. I thought they got a couple bad bounces last year as well. The Iowa State game, or not the Iowa State game, the TCU game where they did the Chinese fire drill to be able to kick the walk-off field goal. I mean, they everything that could go wrong went wrong, but of course, 2 years ago, everything that could have went right. So
went right.
I like Baylor a lot here. Troy, you said you definitely like the 20 to 1.
I think they're worth a conference championship bet at 20 to 1 odds for sure. I trust Dave Aranda, something about just the offensive continuity and just crossing your fingers on defense, the good old 2008 Big 12 style. Like maybe they'll throw us the ball. Sorry to interrupt you, Rush.
Oh, you didn't. I second the motion. I like that 20 to 1 a lot.
Yeah, it seems like a good play. And I was listening to Kramer as well. It's hard not to take a stab at 3 or 4 of these schools that are listed at 20 to 1 or greater odds. I mean, we just saw K-State last year, 12 to 1, when Baylor was an even longer shot. I think they were around 50 to 1 2 years ago. And hell, Iowa State, they didn't win it, but they were in the game against Oklahoma all the way. They were around 40 to 1, 50 to 1 as well that year. So this is the league of long shots, and that's why it's the most entertaining league. And speaking of the most entertaining team last year, that was our TCU Horned Frogs all the way to the national championship. They don't have much coming back. No Duggan, Rush. Break down our Horned Frogs, man.
From the Mormons in Provo to the Baptists in Waco to the Christians in Fort Worth. TCU plus 1,400 to win the Big 12, 7.5 over under. 3 big storylines I have for them this year. A lot of people forgot Duggan's leaving. but he also wasn't the starter last year. Their starter this year, Chandler Morris, got injured in the third quarter opening game against Colorado, who they play again this season. And that's when Duggan was able to come in. So Chandler Morris had a lot of time to develop, kind of see what Duggan did well, get really comfortable. And I think because of that and the maturity, he can step in and do big things. Of course, we got new offensive coordinator, Kendall Briles. That Briles last name may sound familiar, especially to you, Troy. And this is kind of the concern area for TCU, almost the reverse Iowa State, because when you have one thing, you have the other thing. It's amazing how things even out, right? You had Iowa State lose 6 one-possession games, and you had TCU win a bunch of one-possession games. I mean, that West Virginia game, Ryan, the Baylor game, the Oklahoma State game, even the Michigan game, a lot of breaks went TCU's way. So they have to win those close games again if they're going to go back to the playoff or at least the Big 12 championship. And to do that is, can their defense take a major step forward? It's a lot of inconsistency last year, especially with how good Duggan was. A lot of, the offense really picked up a lot of slack. Can that defense kind of be, if the offense isn't performing, can they step up, make that step forward to then win those one possession games? Because if they don't, you're going to see, I think, Iowa State and TCU almost flip-flop this year in those one possession games.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to convince yourself that TCU is going to duplicate that magic. They were the team of destiny, the Magic, Sonny Dykes' first year. I kind of am with you. They kind of scream at potentially this year's Iowa State. How about you, Troy?
I would almost assume, just like Rush said, that the one possession games almost switch directly between Iowa State and TCU. I think TCU's got I know you're high on all the teams, Ryan, but some of these teams are going to have to lose football games. They can't just play each other and both win. And I think TCU is going to be one of those teams that loses a couple more games than expected.
Yeah.
I've convinced myself that I'm going to be high on everybody but Texas and Oklahoma. So I'm going to talk myself into them both finishing like 1-8 somehow.
Captain Insano's right, man. Cinderella turns back into pumpkin. That's going to happen to TCU pretty hard this year, I think.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I think that's why you're going to see, like I brought up earlier when we were talking about Kansas, I think there's just going to be so much parity this year. I think you're going to see almost all this conference fall in that 5-7 to 7-5 range.
What are the chances we get like a 4 or 5 way tie and they have to figure something out for the Big 12 championship that's 7 or 8 tiebreakers deep?
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
It feels like I can guarantee it's going to come down to the last week of the season. I know that sounds cliche, but there's going to be, what do you think? Over under. We'll set the over under on tiebreaker scenarios headed into the last week for teams to toggle for position. We'll say 5.5 over under scenarios.
5 for sure. Oh, at least 5.
5. So what we'll have, there's 14 teams. There would be 7 games. How many of those 7 games are going to matter for both teams or at least one team?
We'll say, actually, that's a better way of putting it. How many games will matter, or how many games will impact who could reach the final the following week in Dallas at Jerry World? I'm going to say over under 3.5.
And it can just be for one team. It doesn't have to be both
just
teams.
for one team.
I'll say 4. I'll take the over on that. I'll say 4.
I think it might even be more than that. You might have teams maybe thinking
5.
like, oh man, if we beat Baylor by more than 28 points, we'll get the 5th tiebreaker and that'll get us in as long as Kansas loses to Kansas. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And Insano with a good point in the chat. They're going to decide this year by tiebreakers based off a 3rd down conversion. So, yeah, that's about what the Big 12 is going to be this
Texas
year.
Texas is screwed, so we're good with that tiebreaker, Insano.
Every Big 12 team meet at Jerry World before the Big 12 championship. Whoever scores the most 2-point conversions, then those 2 teams play.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to just the different matchups in the middle of the tier when these 2 teams, especially these teams going to a new site for the first time, the 4 newcomers. So yeah. Speaking of newcomers, Texas Tech all of a sudden's got some new energy out there in West Texas. They're over under set at 7.5, 12-1, same area that K-State was last year to win the Big 12. Joey McGuire is headed into year number 2. Texas guy, through and thin, baby. High school, Baylor, finishes 8-5. We mentioned it the other day when we were talking about the Red Raiders. Came on really strong at the end of the year, won their last 4 games, including the big bowl game where they just blew out Ole Miss. There's a lot. I think a headline here, though, they seem to be a trendy Cinderella pick here to make a step in year number 2, but their schedule's really difficult. They lose Tyree Wilson, who was the 7th pick in the draft, to the Vegas Raiders. Can their defense duplicate the efforts? And also, offensively, can they keep taking a step forward that they showed in those last 3 to 4 games with Tyler Shaw at quarterback? What do you guys think of the Red Raiders coming into this year? They're definitely a sexy pick right now to be a long shot to win the Big 12.
I know we're talking about it in terms of obviously to go to the Big 12 championship and how that will align with the rankings. And that's, the Big 12 play. They're out of conference. But another focus on their out of conference schedule. They open up in Wyoming. They are going to Wyoming September 2nd. So yeah, all right off the bat. And then they host Oregon the same day that Baylor and Utah play as well. So, I mean, we talk about litmus tests. I mean, there's 2 right off the bat for Texas Tech. And then their big conference schedule opens up. Unfortunately, I have to say this, but opens up a little easier with West Virginia, then Houston, and then kind of ramps up from there. So I think a lot of these teams, we're going to kind of know their identity from the start. And I think this is going to be that Texas Tech team. I do like Texas Tech this year. I'm not as high on them as everyone else, but I do think they could win any game and they can lose any game. Their floor to ceiling it might be the biggest of all the schools.
The Big 12 in a nutshell right there.
Yeah. But actually speaking to a particular school, yeah.
You said they have Oregon coming to Jones AT&T Stadium, right?
Yes. Yeah, not to be confused with Jerry Jones.
Not to be confused with Jerry Jones's AT&T Stadium. The Bo Nix is about to look like Sam Bradford at Jones AT&T Stadium. He's going to throw for 280 yards, rush for 150.
I'm interested to see just like the rejuvenated fan base there too this year. I mean, they're giddy for football in West Texas, and rightfully so with the way they finished that season.
You've got to you do have to give some credit. They do get pretty rowdy out there in Lubbock and West Texas. It's a pretty fun place. Oh
yeah, that outside of Morgantown, that is probably my favorite Big 12 town. But hey, I still love them all.
Well, Provo now.
Yeah, Provo is not at the top. I can tell you that.
What, you don't like the bars in Provo or lack thereof?
No, I don't. I don't want to decide between Aquafina and Deer Park. So yeah, I'm good. Speaking of teams, I don't really like. I like Norman, but I don't really like the Sooners. Troy, preview the Oklahoma Sooners year 2 of the Venables era.
Year 2 of the Venables era, and they've already got them right back at the 9.5 number for their win total, which is that's going to be tough for them to get to. They're only 3-1 to win the Big 12. I think you can stay away from that 3-1. Obviously, the biggest story is going to be how this awesome defensive coordinator at Clemson came to Oklahoma and gave up 30 a game.
Yeah.
You got to get that number down significantly. Having Dylan Gabriel is going to help them out. I think probably 3 or 4 weeks into the year, especially if they can beat that Texas team, is going to be a great time to cash out your Dylan Gabriel Heisman bet. He's not going to win, but he's going to pull a Geno Smith in 5 or 6 weeks into the year. You're going to want to take that cash out before things come crashing down. I'm very curious to see in the last year of Texas and Oklahoma being in the Big 12 after Texas got them 49-0 last year.
Yeah.
We'll see if there's any kind of retribution or something like that. It'd be pretty cool if Oklahoma and Texas tied. I don't think that can happen, but that would be pretty sweet. Just eliminate them both from possibly winning the conference.
No ties in college football, only the NFL and soccer. Rush, what do you think of these Sooners? This is an interesting team. By the way, that non-con schedule is prime for SEC because it's Cupcake City to start the season. I know that they were originally supposed to play Georgia, though, and then Sankey wiped that.
Yeah, I think with Oklahoma this year, I do think they bounce back. I know we're going to be an anti-Oklahoma and anti-Texas podcast since they're leaving, and good riddance there. But I think Venables turns it around this year. I don't really think you can hold last year too much against him. I know, obviously, being a defensive coach, giving up 30 points isn't good, but that whole Oklahoma team basically either went with Lincoln Riley to USC or, entered the transfer portal. So I don't hold last year too much against them. But year two, especially at a program like Oklahoma, I'm pretty sure Oklahoma in terms of boosters and money is the biggest one in all of college football. So you got to turn it around this year. You don't have the time that a place like West Virginia has. So
I wouldn't even go out on a limb and say it's more likely that Venables is on the hot seat after this year than Mike Gundy.
I don't think you're going out too far on a limb on that one, though.
Because if Brent Venables wins 6 or 7 games again, he's probably gone. Oklahoma's a spot that can actually get a coach that might step away from another job to come down there to Norman, especially going into the SEC. But I still think that 9.5 number, they might win 10 games, including the bowl game.
Their schedule is so soft for Oklahoma this year. I mean, we talked about it with the non-con. I mean, you start with Arkansas State, SMU, and Tulsa, and then who was the other one that they're supposed to play? I don't see it. But anyway, I mean, they're supposed to play Georgia, and they don't play Georgia anymore. So by default, their schedule is a lot softer. And then the Texas game obviously is on a neutral site, so it'll be interesting with Oklahoma. All right. We will transition into my team, the Kansas State Wildcats, my 12-1 K-State Wildcats last year, defending champs. They are back at plus 650 this year, over under set at 8.5. Getting disrespected once again in the Little Apple, the better Apple. This is year number 5 of the Chris Klieman era, coming over from North Dakota State where he won all those national titles. He's 30-20. 20-16, obviously had the magical run last year. I think the story, it's kind of the narratives are kind of the same with K-State and Kansas, where they go from, in their own terms, being the hunter to the hunted now. K-State's got the bullseye on their back, winning the Big 12. I think that it all comes down to Will Howard. Does he continue to keep making steps and steps? I mean, everybody likes to talk about Ewers and Gabriel, but the two best quarterbacks, in my opinion, are in the state of Kansas with Jalen Daniels and Will Howard. When Will Howard took over for Martinez last year in the TCU game, he won every single start outside of the Alabama game at the end of the year, including a win over TCU in the Big 12 championship. And their offense seemed to just get another gear. I know they lose Deuce Vaughn, but they bring back their whole offensive line. I love this team once again. I mean, it's hard to pick at the team other than they lost the little man, the little magic, and Deuce Vaughn. What are your guys' thoughts?
Ryan, what if I told you just even 2 years ago, maybe last year, but I'll say 2 years ago, that the two best quarterbacks in the Big 12 starting in 2023 would be in the state of Kansas? You brought that up, but it's like, I still don't even believe that. Are you sure you don't mean point guards? No, I mean quarterbacks. So
yeah.
Hey, it's
point guards too.
I think in terms of the team that, if you want to play the Kansas State, versus TCU, because they played each other in the Big 12, even though TCU went to the playoffs, but kind of similar teams who sustains their success. I'm leaning towards Kansas State.
I mean, at 6.5 to 1, you got to put something on Kansas State. They're the defending champs, and they're going to give you plus 650. I mean, it's got to be worth some kind of sprinkle.
It amazes me at how disrespected they are again. Like, they won it last year. They went to Dallas, where TCU is located. It was a home game for TCU, and K-State controlled the line of scrimmage from that game, and they bring back their whole offensive line. Colin Klein, everybody remembers him being almost winning the Heisman there in 2012. I mean, K-State's got the magic, I think, once again this year, but They do have to be the hunted, and the schedule is difficult, but I trust that culture. I trust that program, and it seems like the Bill Snyder days are living on strong with Chris Klieman there headed into year number 5.
Ryan, their schedule is actually not terrible. I mean, their first 3 games, got a couple FCS opponents, and they play Missouri. That game's actually at Missouri, but definitely a winnable game. Then they have UCF at home. They have to go to Lubbock and Stillwater,
Austin,
but then they also have, their biggest one's probably Austin, because then they have TCU at home, Baylor at home, Iowa State at home, Farmageddon at home. They go to Kansas, but I mean, you're still staying in the same state. I actually think that's a pretty good schedule.
Well, and the hiccup game potentially, because remember they lost to Tulane last year, the game before Oklahoma. They were looking ahead to Oklahoma.
Yeah,
Troy could be the potential hiccup in the knockout. That won't impact their Big 12 odds, but yeah, no, I mean, the Stillwater, Lubbock, and Austin trips are always tricky, but yeah, I love K-State again. I can't say that enough.
Rush knows you have to be careful when visiting Troy's. They'll get you fucked up real quick.
Be careful of the rubber, and be careful of expectations when they're high in Austin. Troy, your favorite team, the Texas Longhorns. Actually, Steve Sarkisian's on the mic right now.
The alcoholic Mormon, or the Mormon alcoholic.
Drunk as fuck?
No, I don't think so. Not yet. He may be after they take a couple early losses, but tell us why Texas is back or not back.
Well, obviously the number one storyline as always is Texas actually back. And with a win total over under of 9.5 and only plus 115 to win the conference, the answer is very clearly yes. Texas is going to win 11 games easily this year with studded coach Steve Sarkisian. There are no questions around the team at all. They haven't gone 13-12 the first 2 years under him or anything like that. It's very funny you said that with joking around about expectations. My first line on my notes, it just says expectations LOL. Texas is not winning 10 fucking football games. There is no way. No way. The first Alabama game, I mean, I guess they only, like we were talking about earlier, they only leave the state to go to Bama and to Iowa State. But I think you can chalk those up as 2 losses. And then I think they're going to lose another game in between everything else. I don't see them getting to that 10 number.
I just look at the road spots. And honestly, if you told me they were going to beat Alabama, then drop some of these other games, it wouldn't shock me. So
no,
outside of Alabama, I mean, could you imagine peak Texas is back if they wanted Alabama somehow? My God. At Baylor, the final trip to Waco, at Houston, who tried to keep them out of the league Texas tried to keep Houston out of the league for so many years, at TCU and Ames. I mean, what's the ceiling there? 2-2 realistically on the road there?
You do have to take into account that Sarkisian worked in Tuscaloosa, so he knows all the good drinking spots there. That could be rough, or it could be awesome. He could show up with a greater than Bob Huggins BAC and just start calling the craziest plays of all time and beat Alabama.
I'm telling you, Troy, call me crazy. Could Texas go 6-6?
No, you're not crazy for thinking that. Texas, no. I could see them going 7-5.
Let me paint a picture here, because I love shitting on Texas. What if Quinn Ewers continues to struggle on the road? All of a sudden, it starts getting loud in that quarterback room, because they might have a couple of highly touted guys, and all of a sudden you got drama over there, and the season unravels. I mean, I read off the road games. You got Oklahoma too in the Red River shootout in the revenge game of 49-0. Rush, give us some Texas. I don't know. Maybe we're too down on them. They are talented.
I'm someone that prides myself on a realist, and I want the audience out there to know is obviously horns down, can't stand them. But when it actually comes to making our bets and stuff, is I will put the fandom to the side and give what I really think. And here's what I really think. I don't think they're a 10-win team, but I also don't think they're a 6-win team. I think around that 8-4 mark is probably going to be right for Texas. I do think Texas has a little more sense of urgency this year because then they know they're joining the SEC. Now, to counter that is, and we've talked about this before, Ryan, is sometimes that Texas sense of urgency actually goes and hurts them. Yeah. But don't get me wrong. I want them to go 0-12. I don't want them to win it all, but I think they're going to be all right this year. I really do.
But I mean, their expectations are playoff.
Well, I mean, that's the problem is
yeah.
The expectations for Texas every year are the same. It's kind of like they're the, whether you like it or not, Ryan, they're kind of the New York Yankees of college football. You know, they haven't
Cowboys,
really been,
yeah.
The Longhorn Network picked them to win every game but Iowa State. They picked him to beat Alabama 31-17. When's the last time Alabama scored 17 points in a football game?
Yeah, that's delusional. So you won't get that type of fandom on this. We'll keep it real and really give people what we think. But I'm just on Texas.
We got something from Jordan 69 here that wants us to predict the score for Texas and Alabama. I'm taking Alabama 41, Texas 17.
Man, so what was it last year? 20-19, and Alabama played about as bad as they could have played. Saban's gonna have those guys ready to go for that game. I'm with you. I'll go Alabama 35, Texas 20.
It's in Tuscaloosa, right?
Yeah, yes. It's in Tuscaloosa. Yeah. I think 2 touchdowns.
I'll go 38-21, Alabama.
Yeah. I think he's going to have those guys juiced to play that game. He's going to motherfuck them all week. So.
We got you got a Neal Brown. Oh, gosh.
Is Neal Brown the worst coach in the Big 12? I mean, I don't see how he doesn't.
Well, he's definitely top 3 worst. You don't have to ask that. You don't have to ask that part. He's one of the worst 3. But
I don't want him to be. But as of right now, resume wise, yes, he is. He's the worst.
Yeah.
Based on talent, I think I would actually put him about even with Satterfield because Satterfield has had way too much talent at Louisville to have had his players play as poor as they have.
Yeah. No, I agree. Satterfield's a little bit unknown.
Obviously, Gundy's number 1. Duh.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. We're a Mike Gundy podcast, so that's why it's ridiculous anybody that suggests he should be fired. So,
what are the chances that any of these coaches move back to old schools? Like, what if Mike Gundy were to move out and they hired Dana Holgorsen from Houston?
I don't see how Dana would get another Power 5 job.
But remember those 2 years with Oklahoma State as the offensive coordinator? I remember.
Well, hey, I was going to say, too, Dana gets Texas again. We remember last time Dana played Texas, the Will Grier game in Austin. He's going to have something for those Horns when they come to H-Town at the beginning of October. Horns down. All right, guys. Well, that will wrap up our storylines. I feel like you guys have a gauge kind of where we're leaning this year, but obviously there's, 6 weeks between now and week 0. A lot of time. I mean, like I said, I've
transfer portal reopens.
Yeah, I kind of talked myself into liking every team but Texas and Oklahoma. So I'm sure I'll make an angle for a couple other guys. And then at the end of the summer, we'll actually give out our official picks. We'll be back Friday to talk Big 12 Media Days. Before we get up on out of here, Rush, tell everybody where to find you. Obviously, the YouTube crowd sees everybody's thumbnails, but where else?
Absolutely. At Rambling Rush on Instagram and Twitter. Of course, follow the Ryan and Rush Show as well, where we jump into specifically West Virginia sports. Almost trying to get to our 1,000 subscriber mark on YouTube, growing quite fast. So if you can give us a subscribe on YouTube, that would be great. Check out the Ryan and Rush Show. And that's where you can find good old Rambling Rush.
And how about you, Mr. Big 12 Guru Messiah?
You can find me on Twitter at Troy Chewning, my full name. Or you can just search DC Sports Messiah and look for the funny photo of me smoking a joint. You should be able to find it pretty easily. And please, like and subscribe this thing for us so we can keep it pumping and hopefully have the sponsorship for Big 12 Media Days through the college experience here in maybe 4 or 5 years or something like that.
Less than. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Everybody subscribe to the college experience on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast shows, whatever your source is. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at TCE on SGPN. You can follow me at Moneyline_Mac. I'm pretty active on Twitter. So that's all I got, and we will see everybody on Friday, and let it ride.